Hello, everybody, and welcome to the ALS United Mid-Atlantic Goals podcast. My name is Tony Heil, Executive Director here at ALS United Mid-Atlantic. And if you've listened to our past episodes of this podcast, you know that we share various perspectives about ALS, whether it's people living with ALS, caregivers, researchers, nurses, social workers, even those outside of ALS who may have something important to share, like about advocacy, about funding research in general, scientific process, or about issues that are really important that we can all identify with. Because while we're here to end ALS and attack symptoms, we're here predominantly for people. And that includes not just the people living with ALS, but their caregivers and extended network of family and friends, because our social workers and nurses and our entire staff, we are here for you, so we can make sure that you can manage this disease and what comes next as best as possible. And we want you to take advantage of our programs, which you can do at alsmidatlantic.org. Today, I'm really happy and excited to talk with my friend Kate Adamek. She is our social worker focused on the state of Delaware. And as you can find Delaware on a map pretty easily, one of the top 50 states, in my opinion, one of the top 3 states in our area. And Kate is providing that one-on-one care for people with ALS and their families, listening to them, providing her years of experience, and making sure that they adapt to the situations and take on the programs and services that we have when they need them, and trying to prepare ahead of time. So, Kate, thank you so much for talking today. I look forward to speaking more.
Good to be here.
So, Kate, tell us a little bit about yourself, because you have possibly the most interesting life of anyone that works here at ALS United Mid-Atlantic. I think you've lived on 4 continents, right?
I've lived in 8 different countries on 4 continents. Good memory. And I've lived in 9 different states. I've traveled in 23 different countries and 31 different states. So I'm kind of a wanderer, I guess you would say. It's hard for me to stay in one place very long.
So I recently read a book about the American Revolution. And trust me, they're going somewhere with this. And the author pointed out that what made George Washington successful versus any other leader at the time in terms of drafting the Constitution and starting the country as a first president is that because he was the head of the Continental Army, he had spent time in the rest of became America. He had been in the colonies. He had been from Virginia to Pennsylvania, New York, and other places. So he was worldly for that time. And that gave him a lot of advantages. As someone who's a social worker and has provided therapy for people, do you think that being worldly helps your perspective with how to address different situations with stress or other people?
Well, I think, one of the things you learn if you have itchy feet like I do, and that means just liking to, experience a lot of different places and cultures, is the commonalities, the ways in which people, their needs, their concerns, how systems work, even if it's a very different culture, like the difference between India and Wisconsin. Even though there are some significant differences, there are some commonalities, and that's helpful to me to kind of have that as a basic underlying principles and information and experience that helps to inform my work with people.
And Delaware itself, you help people with ALS throughout the state of Delaware.
That's
in
correct.
various ways.
Yeah.
Delaware might not seem like the most diverse place for people who don't know it, but you can have a lot of diversity just in the state of Delaware, even in just one county, right? So you have to understand different perspectives.
That's absolutely true. I mean, we have people who are, relatively new to this country in terms of generations. Some people who are themselves have immigrated, and people who've lived here for a long time and their families. And while it can look like a kind of white bread state, I've worked with people with, Asian, a number of different cultural backgrounds. And we don't always take those into account when we're working with people. In many ways, we're the same, but we also have to allow for cultural differences in how we approach things.
And when you come to someone's house, because you do home visits or meet with them at clinic, it's hard. You have to establish trust right away. And I imagine a lot of establishing trust is having respect for those differences from the very first minute.
Yeah. I think one of the things I learned as a therapist many years ago when I was practicing as a psychotherapist is one of my African American colleagues said to me, if you have an African American client, the first thing you should say to them is that, there's going to be some cultural differences. I used to say to them, you may have noticed I'm not African American. And then they would laugh. And I would say, if there's ever a time that I inadvertently say something that's offensive or hurtful to you, please tell me, because I am not, I don't have the same background that you have. And I want to know if I've stepped on your toes or worse. And that really set the tone of that trust and letting them know that I was open to hearing that the cultural differences might sometimes get in the way if I wasn't paying attention or informed.
And that can work with people with any cultural background or a religious background. So, you may meet with someone one weekend who is Catholic and you want to make sure that you respect some of their family traditions. You might meet with someone from another place who is an entirely different religion and you want to make
Yeah.
sure that they respect their language, national origin. So it's good to be able to just let them know, I want your feedback so that I can do my job the best way possible.
I think the other thing is understanding how their cultural, religious, spiritual beliefs feed into their supports and asking, when I do an initial assessment visit, are you connected to a church community that is important to you? And if it is, then continuing to help them to build on the support they get, or even reach out to that church community for some of the help they might need, like people to come and stay with the person. Those church communities can be really good resources. But if I don't ask the question, I'm not going to know that there's another source of support and resources for them.
Yeah. So let me know, when do you first meet a person with ALS? Because you don't come in the first day they have a symptom, obviously. So when do you make that introduction to someone with ALS in your work?
Well, it depends. It can be very quickly. I have visited with people who were diagnosed a week before. That's probably the soonest. And then I have people who I haven't even known about for various reasons until they're 2 years into their diagnosis. Maybe we didn't get the referral. Maybe they didn't know we existed. That's why it's so important to us to try to connect with referral sources and make sure that people in this area for example, neurologists are aware of our existence and the clinics know we're there, but that's where we get a lot of referrals from. So sometimes it's an accident. Like I have found out that there are people who are diagnosed and have been seeing a neurologist at the walk, for example, and they may have been going to a clinic where the clinic did not make referrals to us. So it can really vary. The longest that anybody's been diagnosed that I've had initial visit with somebody is maybe a little around 3 years. And sometimes it's longer because they've moved from another state. Like I just visited with a gentleman yesterday who's been diagnosed for, I think, about 3 or 4 years, but he was living in New York until recently. They just moved down here like a month or two ago. So it's really runs the gamut.
And I imagine in a state like Delaware where people will move to be in a shore community like near Rehoboth Beach, there are a number of people who have moved to be in an area that's better for them than somewhere that might be more congested or hard to get around.
Exactly.
So why is it so important that they get in touch with a social worker instead of just going online and getting some resources for their house?
Well, I don't think Okay, so I just talked to a lady today who was a self-referral, and she had done just that. I mean, she was diagnosed by Dr. Quinn up at Penn, but has not attended a clinic, was just trying to get all the information she could because she was diagnosed a month ago, and came across us and, was just kind of doing a little bit of a shotgun approach, but fortunately got in touch with us. And when I talked to her this morning, I was able to kind of clarify some of where she might get her resources. My concerns about people just going online is they can get a lot of good connections like I am ALS or, Compassionate Care ALS or us, but they can also get some sketchy places. And, when you check with Dr. Google, you don't know the quality of the information you're going to get. So it's just really good to have connection with an organization like ours because we can really kind of, I don't know, what's the word, curate a lot of information for you and kind of point you in the right direction. Like, why would you go to Compassionate Care ALS website, for example? Or let's get you on ALS News Today subscription, online free subscription. Let's get you the set of booklets, the guides that are published out there. We can kind of call out a lot of that information and get them away from more, either duplication of information and kind of make sure that they're not getting and simplify so they're not getting overwhelmed.
And I think that a lot of us are not always great at self-assessment. So if I say I'm feeling this way, having my wife or a social worker or a nurse look at me, they'll notice your face doesn't look right, or you're walking differently, or you're breathing differently that I might not notice, or I may have underplayed. So having a social worker in your life with this disease, you will recognize some questions or some issues that maybe the other person doesn't think about.
And I think that, there are typical concerns and typical needs. So when I do a home visit like I did yesterday, one of my guiding questions for the visit is, what are your current needs and concerns? And I also don't just ask the person with ALS, but I ask the caregiver, what are your current needs and concerns, so that I can sort of focus our work, and then letting them know also that this is just the beginning of a beautiful friendship. And we're going to be with them throughout this journey. And as they need different information, that will also be available to them. One of the things I say to people is, if you have a question, and it's not a medical question that should be addressed to your medical team if you have one. If you don't have one, let's get you one. Okay, number one. But number two, if you have a question, and even if you think it's not something I can answer, just call Kate first, okay? Or email me. And if I don't have the answer, I will research it for you, including going to our very competent and collegial care services team with a lot of years of experience.
And you are part of our wider team. How does that help your work, that you're not on your own? You may have a patient that you're the only social worker for, but you can talk to our director of care services, our other social workers or nurses, that it's a team approach. How does that help you be successful?
Well, I don't have to be all things to all people. I think you and I were talking earlier about how you kind of, I am just used to being responsible. And one of the things I have to remember, and I've had to learn throughout my life, is it's not all up to me. And that there's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know the answer to that. And, we have different areas of expertise. Like, for example, I don't have anything like the expertise that Elisa Brownlee has. I would never presume to try to answer those questions. So if somebody has a question about accessibility or devices or setting up a smart house or whatever, I will immediately ask for Elisa to do a consult with them. So that's not something I'm trying to run around and educate myself about, because honestly, there's just too much information on there about that I couldn't possibly master. And the same is true for, working with a clinic team. We don't have an official presence at the clinic I attend in Salisbury, Maryland, because there are no ALS clinics in Delaware, but that's the one that serves our especially Southern Delaware patients. And so I am not about to, try to master PT/OT information. I'm not about to master pulmonology, the work of a pulmonologist. So I just, throughout my career, and I've worked in a lot of different settings over the years, I have found that the whole interdisciplinary approach is the only way to go. It's the only way you get the top quality of service.
You do have expertise in many things that are unique and special for you. One of your areas of expertise is family therapy and talking to people about the family dynamics. That's a very touchy and difficult conversation for people with ALS. It's not something they're prepared for. What are some of the questions or discussions that should be brought up with the rest of the family once they're faced with the diagnosis of ALS?
Well, one of the most important things I think you can do is normalize what they're experiencing. For example, I have patients with adult children and they seem to be too different. You either have the adult children just disappearing or you have them hovering. And so I try to, especially for the ones that seem to have disappeared, well, not especially, for the ones that seem to have disappeared or just avoidant, I try to normalize that. I don't say that you have to feel good about it, but, let's normalize it and let me see if there's a way that you can help them to feel more educated. And you can also ask them specifically for the help you want, because one of the reasons people avoid is they don't know what to do. And so they feel helpless and powerless and they just kind of go away. On the other hand, those who are hovering, people are saying, as I often say to my own adult daughter, I did manage to get to be this age, without any major catastrophes. And I think I know how to do this. So please don't try to take over for me, especially for the person with ALS. Help them to let their family know what they want from them. I think that is one of the most important things to do, is to be specific about how they can help. And sometimes it's useful, I find, to do a family meeting where we kind of outline what the concerns are of the person with ALS and their caregiver, who is often a spouse, and then what they want from family members, maybe what the tasks might be going forward. Like, is it going to be looking at transportation issues? Is it going to be looking at, how they're going to get equipment? Whatever it is, if then family members can kind of step up and say, I'm willing to take that on, that's helpful to me because I'm not hearing from 5 different family members about the same issue. And it's also helpful to the family and the person with ALS and their caregiver to understand they've been able to say what they need and what they want at any point in time. And then the family knows what they're going to do instead of thinking, I need to do it all, or, it just helps to clarify, I think, some of those family roles and the tasks that go into. I mean, this is a huge hit. It's a huge emotional hit for families. And it can sometimes take a while to just take on board the diagnosis. What does it mean? One of my most important roles is as a navigator, helping people navigate this disease, how to get their needs met, if they need in-home health care, where they might start looking for that, what kind of resources are available, and helping to point them in the right direction. And at the beginning, I will always remember one initial interview I did, and the wife was a scientist, and she was like, she wanted to know everything start to finish. And I just had to kind of rein her in and say, that's not something you need to know right now. When we get to that point, I will help you get the information you need. So let's focus on this moment. And if it's new diagnosis, just kind of taking that on board. What does it mean? What might it mean? But also understanding the unpredictable nature of the disease, and again, validating that. Validation of what they're experiencing, while at the same time helping them to not have their emotions telling them things that aren't accurate.
And that, like you said, that navigation is not so easy because the disease does not always track in one linear way. So if my grandfather was diagnosed and he may go on one progression that seems pretty standard, and then the next person, they'll ask me, how was it? Their situation could be much faster, much more challenging, much easier maybe. I don't know. But no 2 people are really the same, and
Exactly.
help them with that.
And I think if people can kind of make the adjustment, it's not easy, to the fact that they're just not going to know. They're not going to know until it happens. Like the pals and his wife I visited yesterday, he has a variant, and it just right now affects his arms and his hands, but he's not sure when and if it might transition into other parts of his body. How does he need to be ready for that? Is he going to have bulbar symptoms, which is, as you know, the mouth and the throat? And so getting used to unpredictability is really tough because we rely on, I don't know, many years ago, I lived in Tanzania with my husband and daughter, and life there was really unpredictable. You never knew when things were going to be in shortages, what you were going to be able to get, when the electricity was going to go out. blah, blah, blah. And one of my friends had read a study in Amnesty International, which talked about the worst form of torture. And the worst form of torture is unpredictability. So if you torture somebody every day at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, they get accustomed to it. But if one day you do it at 1, the next day you do it at 10 a.m., the next day you don't do it at all, it just drives people crazy because they can't adjust to it.
Mhm.
So I think that's one of the things is just acceptance of the unpredictable nature of this disease and trying to plan sufficiently ahead. Like you don't want to need a ramp tomorrow and then not have your ramping application in. But by the same token, when is a good time to put a ramp in? If you're
Mhm.
still not having any issues with walking at all. So it's a balancing act between looking far enough ahead, whatever that means, and addressing the needs of today and maybe tomorrow as opposed to 6 months from now.
And so much of that work is about the adjustments for the caregiver, even more so than the person with ALS, whether it's
Absolutely.
a spouse or the adult children of someone with ALS or another person who's a caregiver. Because if you are assisting, let's say, 100 people with ALS in a year, which is not unreasonable for someone in your position, in your role, that means that you probably are assisting 200 other caregivers by just listening to their concerns or educating them. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think we really do focus on the caregivers and ALS United Mid-Atlantic. We have a caregiver support group, which I really encourage people to attend. We do in Delaware, we do a Caregivers Day every year. And what I find, especially in the Caregivers Day, because I don't do the support or the resource group, that's Janie, is how much people have in common, even when the disease may be running a very different course for their loved one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that helps to give them a sense of how, that what they're contending with is it's a normal reaction to an abnormal situation, as we used to say. And I think it's also good for them to understand that getting aggravated with the person is normal. Feeling powerless, wanting to get a break from it. I always say to people, it's not the person you're getting a break from. You're getting a break from ALS.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and asking for help, that is really often very difficult. First of all, it's difficult for the person with ALS, but it's very difficult often for the caregivers to ask for the help they need.
And that's just good lesson for all of us, right? Like it's better to be open to asking for help and realize you're powerless about certain things, realizing that we're all human. That's just good advice is to be open to help.
Well, and again, harking back to my many traveling days and, like having a car breakdown in the middle of, nowhere or, not being able to find a place to stay or just, I have never had a bad experience in asking for help. I've always had people step up and do sometimes amazing things to help me. I had one couple drive me, hours to the next place where I could get my car towed, So, I mean, obviously there are risks asking for help. But again, I've been very lucky. I've never had any issues with asking for help.
Yeah, I think when I talk to people who want to donate to us or want to volunteer, people want to help.
They
People
do.
like being helpful.
Yes.
A lot of us feel like we're putting someone else out, like we're imposing on them. But as I've seen from so many others, people feel almost offended that you wouldn't ask for help sometimes.
So one of the things I say to my families, especially the person with ALS and the caregiver, is people want to help, but they don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So give them specific things that you need.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to I would love it if you could bring me dinner once a week.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I need somebody to stay with John while I go to the dentist. The other thing is when people are reluctant to ask for help, I ask them, so how does it feel to you when somebody asks you for help? And they always say, well, it feels really good. I feel like I have something to offer, et cetera, et cetera. So I say, would you withhold that good feeling from somebody else? So actually asking somebody for help can be a kindness to them, letting them know that, there is something they have to offer. And so sometimes when people think about it that way, it's more easy, but it doesn't come naturally to a lot of us. I mean, this country, rugged individualism, which never worked. I mean, The
Mhm.
Pilgrims didn't come here one by one. He didn't cross the prairies in one covered wagon. Daniel Boone didn't cross the Cumberland Gap by himself. Everybody's done things with support.
Mhm.
And so it's important to demystify that nobody is, interdependence is the name of the effective way to go.
One thing I've heard from some caregivers is that they can often feel guilt for stepping away for a day to go to work, for going out to eat with people. They feel guilty if someone else is doing in-home care and they're not there for them. How do you help to have those conversations with people about the guilt that they can have? Because it's very natural,
Yes.
and a lot of people it's similar
Yeah.
too.
Well, okay, I worked many, many years with families who had children or other family members with chronic and or life-threatening diseases. One of the things I used to say to the caregivers who didn't want to leave is, martyrs are dead people. If you're martyr yourself to this, you're going to be dead, and then that person's going to be up the proverbial creek without a paddle. Okay. I think I said that during the recent Caregivers Day back in May. And one of the caregivers said to me afterwards, that was my one takeaway from the day was martyrs are dead people. And it's kind of a funny thing to say, but I do think it kind of, if the caregiver crashes and burns, there's nobody there, or that's going to may mean the person has to go into a facility, or it may mean other family members are going to have to scramble to take over their role. It's not going to be helpful. That person needs to have time away. They need respite. I mean, respite is built into hospice care, for example. So that's the way I just try to encourage them. And sometimes I just bully them. I just say, you got to get away, and I'm not going to hear anything different, But I think, mostly if they can think about it in the way that self-care is not an indulgence, it's
Mhm.
a necessity for them to keep going.
And I hope that you practice self-care because being a social worker for people with ALS can be emotionally draining itself. Being here, we just had an ALS 101 that Gail Hausman ran. It was wonderful. She was explaining the realities of ALS. We had a caregiver speak about their experience, and we need a break sometimes.
Yeah.
Some people ask me, did you see this ALS movie? Did you read this book about ALS? And it's like, no, I have to turn that off. I hope you practice what you preach.
Well, I had a colleague years ago when I was a psychotherapist in a family therapy practice. And he said, I have a certain point on the on-ramp to the expressway when I'm going home that I stop. That is I leave work behind me and I'm on to home. And I would say that too. I don't answer phone calls after 5 o'clock. I don't work on Fridays. Don't answer the phone on Fridays. My voicemail says that. They know how to get help if they need it. But it can be occasionally on the weekends if somebody texts me, like I've had stuff that really was a little bit urgent. I have the choice of responding, but most of the time, my 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and a lot of Monday, I'm not responding. I'm not an emergency service. That's what I always say to my patients. I am not here. I'm not 911. I want to be here for you, but that is not limitless. Okay. And if
We
people
are
text,
responsive.
yeah,
So
yeah.
if you are not available, they can talk with their clinic. They
Yeah,
can talk
if
with
they
Gail,
really
the
need it.
nurse.
But
They can talk
it's
with
going to be
Steve. They can
during
talk with.
normal working hours, We're
Mhm.
not available at 9 o'clock at night. The office is closed. And so I think, I have learned over the years. Recently, I just had a last minute chance to spend some time with my daughter and her family up at a lake. And it was a very last minute. And I said, yeah, I'm going to do it. And I realized when I did it, even though I'd taken a vacation in May, that I really needed it, that I was getting what we used to call, when I worked in Alaska, I was getting a little crispy. So
Mhm.
it was really good. I had to, reschedule some things. But again, I'm not it. It's not all up to me. And if I have to reschedule a visit with somebody, that's going to be okay because they'll get that visit. It just might not be the day we originally scheduled.
And again, they have other ways of being in touch with us, the services they need. That's why it's good that we don't just employ one social worker for all of
Yeah.
our service. That would not be ideal. But a lot of our team also appears at our ALS United walks. I know you have supported our events, you're telling people to. So, why are the ALS United walks and our events, why is that a very positive thing for people? Why would you encourage the people you meet with, whether it's people living with ALS, caregivers, other family members, why would you encourage them to be part of those events?
Well, in some ways, it's like a big party.
Mm-hmm.
They come, they meet other families, they get a sense of community. It's hopefully, if it's not too hot, it's pleasurable. It's just, then they feel less isolated. Not everybody wants to attend our resource groups. It's not everybody's cup of tea. But coming to the walks, and also especially those that, have a team, they feel like they're making a contribution also, as well as getting that sense of community. They're also feeling there is something I can do. I'm not just on the receiving end here, and people feel good about. I mean, I have one couple, as Chris Albright will tell you, they have like posted flyers all over their huge condominium in Newark. They have drummed up sponsors. And this is a guy that's trached, who can't move anything but his eyes. And he is out there, spreading the word and getting sponsors and making publicity so everybody knows. But that's a way of them not feeling as helpless also in the face of this disease.
I find the walk to be so empowering. It's great to know that you brought in a new sponsor, or even if it's just, you had some family or friends that joined you. Every time I go to an ALS United walk, I will find a team that has 3 or 4 people, and they'll say,
Yeah.
well, I'm not as big as that team with 100 people. I'm like, yeah, but you're so important you're here, because most of our teams are not 300 people, and that
Right.
everyone comes together. Like you said, no one does this by themselves. And I there are sometimes I go to an ALS United walk and I'll see just 2 people, but their loved one passed away 5 years ago, and
Yeah.
this is their way of paying tribute. And I'm just so happy to see them, because it's my way of seeing that person again who I haven't seen in.
Exactly. Exactly. I've just even had one last year. We had one spouse come, but again, he then connected, one surviving
Mm-hmm.
spouse. He wasn't there with anybody else. He just came himself, but he's also a big contributor to our organization in financial ways as well as emotional support. But, he was there and he was talking to other people. And it kind of, again, a lot of people, understandably, when their person dies, want ALS out of their lives. They don't want to have anything to do with ALS anymore. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
By the same token, some people feel like it's a way of honoring that person, the continued their legacy, and also expressing gratitude. Now, I will say, of all the work I've ever done, I have never experienced more appreciation than I do in this job for the work
Mm-hmm.
that I do with families. They're just very grateful. I mean, there are the occasional maybe people who have a harder time with what's going on with them, but for the most part, that people just feel so grateful that they're not doing this alone, and they want to express that gratitude.
Well, let's finish here by letting me express my gratitude to you, Kate. I know it's not an easy job, and we sometimes see you at your best because you're at a party, you're at our walks, you're at
Yeah.
our holiday party. But it makes such a difference. There's so much talk about or sending money, but what matters most about our mission is the human aspect of you making those connections. Or Melissa or Gail, like we don't even have. I don't even think about us about social workers in quotes. It's really the human being in that role that can never adequately be replaced because of the things you do. So thank you so much, Kate, for all
Well,
you
and
do.
Tony, let me just go back and say that of all the jobs I've had over the many, many years of my career, this organization is so supportive. I feel like working for this organization, I always have somebody there if I need them. And it just is a joy, as much as it can be a joy working with people with ALS. I feel so lucky to have the support of the organization and the team. You guys are always there for me. I don't see you in person very often because I just don't like to cross the state line up into Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I
But,
understand.
but that makes a huge difference to me. And so I want to express that appreciation to you as well.
Well, thank you. I think that being here puts everything in perspective in a way that makes other things far less stressful. So it puts everything in an idea that, okay, I can handle other things. People are going through this other stuff, and look what we accomplished today. We helped this person with an issue we didn't even know about a day before. We helped them get
Yeah.
to a wedding. We helped them, get out of the house. We helped them stay in their house. Whatever it is, it's that superhero aspect that you and your team are able to do. So, if you want to learn more about our services, maybe connect with Kate if you're in Delaware, connect with our other social workers or our clinics, please visit our website at alsmidatlantic.org. That's also where you can find information about our fundraising, our volunteer opportunities, and the ALS United Walk. Again, my name is Tony Heil with ALS United Mid-Atlantic, here with my friend Kate. And thank you, Kate, because together we will end ALS.
Thank you.